My feeling, very strong feeling, is that we're looking at a two-phase construction site in many of the so-called Inca stone monuments. And that the Inca structures sit on top of much more ancient rock-cut structures and megalithic structures that we just don't know who built them. And this actually fits with the Inca's own view.
In less than a century, the Inca are believed to have built the greatest wonders of South America using only rudimentary tools. Yet at sites such as Puma Punku, geology exposes a brutal paradox. Diorite blocks that are harder than steel bare cuts of machine-like precision. Something impossible to achieve with the soft copper chisels of the era. When physics rejects the tools, the entire historical narrative we were taught collapses at its foundation. Were the Inca merely unwilling heirs, sheltering within abandoned ruins? And if so, who were the true architects who raised these colossal monuments before vanishing entirely from the memory of humankind? Legends at the summit of the Andes. The geopolitical map of South America was permanently reshaped in the early 15th century, when a powerful entity known as Tawantinsuyo began its expansion from the Cusco Valley. The rise of this empire did not follow the slow and gradual rhythm typical of many ancient civilizations. Instead, it erupted with a speed and scale that still astonishes modern historians. In less than 3 generations, its borders stretched for more than 4,000 kilometers along the spine of the Andes, absorbing hundreds of ethnic groups and governing a population of over 10 million under a unified administrative system. This expansion was sustained by the Chapacñan road network, extending for some 40,000 kilometers, an engineering marvel that cut across coastal deserts and breathless mountain passes, ensuring the constant movement of armies and goods. The most tangible legacy of this power lies in its monumental stone architecture, which has become the defining symbol of Inca civilization. At sites such as Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Machu Picchu, massive walls stand firm against earthquakes, assembled from polygonal blocks of limestone and andesite fitted together with absolute precision. Archaeological consensus has long attributed this achievement to a disciplined social system known as mit'a, a form of mandatory public labor. According to chronicles and excavated evidence, thousands of workers were mobilized to quarry, transport, and polish stone using rudimentary tools such as copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sand, without the aid of the wheel, iron tools, or large draft animals. Construction has been explained as the product of limitless patience and collective strength, where time and manpower compensated for technological limits. The archaeological record confirms that the Inca possessed extraordinary logistical skills, enabling them to sustain and coordinate this vast workforce even in the harshest terrain. Stones weighing tens of tons are believed to have been dragged over wooden rollers and earthen ramps, then raised into position through lever systems powered entirely by human force. Stone surfaces were polished so finely that a razor blade could not slip between the joints, creating solid structures without mortar. All available data paints the picture of a civilization at the height of the Bronze Age, where the physical limits of the human body were pushed back by iron discipline and brilliant resource management. Yet this technical perfection appears in the historical timeline with unsettling suddenness. The Inca Empire, with all its architectural and administrative complexity, seems to step out of the shadows of history fully formed from the very beginning. No archaeological evidence points to failed experiments, collapsed structures caused by miscalculation, or a slow evolution from crude construction methods to masterful skill. The widely accepted lifespan of less than a century for this empire forces history to acknowledge a vertical trajectory of development, in which a local society mastered advanced seismic resistance and elite stone craftsmanship without leaving behind any trace of learning curves or earlier mistakes. Scars in stone. The smoothness of this timeline begins to break down when the tools found in the archaeological record are compared with the actual materials present on site. On the Altiplano Plateau, particularly at Puma Punku and Tiwanaku. Most megalithic structures are carved from red andesite and gray diorite, on the Mohs scale, the standard geological measure of scratch resistance. Andesite and diorite rank between 6 and 7, comparable to or harder than common steel and surpassed only by diamond. By contrast, the finest metal tools known to Andean civilizations, confirmed through thousands of artifacts in museums in Lima and La Paz, were copper chisels and copper arsenic alloys. These metals reach only 3 to 4 on the Mohs scale. According to the basic principles of materials physics, a softer material cannot carve or shape a harder one without being immediately deformed or destroyed. A common alternative hypothesis suggests that ancient builders used harder river stones as hammerstones, patiently chipping away over generations. Yet impact flaking leaves distinctive traces, uneven surfaces, microfractures, and the absence of sharp internal angles due to the limitations of a spherical contact point. The reality at Puma Punku presents a different picture altogether. The stones display perfectly flat surfaces, razor-sharp internal right angles, and complex geometric grooves that a rounded cobble could not even reach, let alone shape. This contradiction is not only technical, it is also embedded in the memories of those believed to be the creators themselves. When early Spanish chroniclers such as Cieza de León and Garcilaso de la Vega arrived and questioned Inca priests and nobles about the origins of these structures, the answers they received were strikingly consistent. The Inca insisted that they did not build them. They claimed that the temples and fortresses had already stood there since the Age of Darkness, before the appearance of the sun, and that they were created by another race, or by the being Viracocha, in a single night. These testimonies, recorded in detail in 16th century texts, are often dismissed by modern scholarship as religious myths meant to sanctify ethnic origins. Yet when one stands before stones weighing more than 100 tons, scattered chaotically at Puma Punku, like toys flung aside, the impotence of copper tools and the denial of the indigenous people together carve a deep fracture in historical logic. There remains a gap that cannot be bridged between the physical capabilities of the Bronze Age and the harsh reality of the stones that lie there today. Mechanical signatures. When modern optical measurement techniques and surface analysis are applied to these stones, the technological gap not only fails to narrow but becomes even more explicit, translated into mathematical parameters. The famous H-shaped stone blocks at Puma Punku, when scanned by laser, reveal internal right angles and contact surface flatness with tolerances smaller than what the human eye can perceive. The grooves running along the bodies of these stones maintain absolutely uniform depth from end to end, a technical characteristic that typically appears only when fixed guiding devices or linear mechanical systems are involved. If shaping had been done purely by human hands, variations in applied force, breathing rhythm, and muscular fatigue would inevitably leave organic inconsistencies on the material surface. Alongside the massive blocks, a series of small drilled holes in andesite stone that is as hard as steel displays deeply troubling material penetration characteristics. These holes share perfectly consistent diameters and smooth internal walls, entirely lacking the uneven spiral scratches that are characteristic of bow drill techniques using copper bits and abrasive sand. In several specimens, the spacing between holes is so regular that it suggests the use of a template or a multi-point drilling system operating simultaneously. The rotational speed and pressure required to penetrate diorite without fracturing the surrounding structure, while polishing the interior of the hole during the cutting process itself, demand a level of energy input and mechanical stability far beyond the capability of human arm motion. Within the context of these technical anomalies, accounts of the so-called golden disc or other metal objects venerated at the Coricancha Sun Temple begin to carry a weight distinct from purely religious symbolism. Surviving descriptions portray the golden disc not merely as an ornamental object, but as an artifact crafted from an unusual alloy, capable of reflecting light in abnormal ways and preserved under strict conditions, brought out only at specific geographic locations such as the Island of the Sun on Lake Titicaca. When the mystical language of ancient sources is stripped away, the described properties align more closely with functional technical devices, acting as keys or activation components within a larger system rather than inert idols. The marks left on the stone demand a level of fabrication consistent with advanced mathematical and mechanical foundations, elements entirely absent from the archaeological record of known Andean cultures. The truth beneath the surface. The presence of an anomalous level of technology is not confined to microscopic analysis, but is exposed openly within the stratified structure of the sites themselves. At Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, a clear architectural layering can be observed with the naked eye, dividing the construction history into two fundamentally different phases. The upper layer, which accounts for most of what visitors see today, consists of smaller, crudely shaped stones bound together with mud mortar and stacked in a disordered manner. This is precisely the construction technique associated with the Inca, consistent with the technological level and tools that have been recovered. Yet, this entire rough superstructure rests upon colossal megalithic foundations, where stones weighing tens of tons are sharply cut and fitted together without mortar, forming a base of almost irrational stability. This contrast tells a story entirely different from the idea of a single unified building process. The Inca did not create these megalithic foundations, they built on top of them. In many locations, Inca walls attempt to imitate the shapes of the megalithic structures beneath, but fail to reproduce the tight joins and precision, forcing builders to use mortar to fill the gaps. Even more telling, many finely crafted megalithic blocks are found overturned, broken, or reused as foundations in positions that make no sense within their original function. This indicates that later builders did not understand the original purpose or design. They were attempting to settle and repair themselves atop the ruins of something vast. More striking still, at certain junctions between megalithic stones, traces of vitrification have been documented. The stone surfaces at these points undergo structural transformation, becoming glossy and smooth like glass, a geological phenomenon that occurs only under exposure to extreme temperatures exceeding 1100 degrees Celsius. Inca pottery kilns or open fires could never generate such concentrated heat across large outdoor granite surfaces. These thermal signatures suggest exposure to high-intensity energy, or a catastrophic destructive event that occurred long before the Inca laid their first stone. The celebrated foundation of the Inca Empire is therefore revealed as a fragile outer layer, draped over the remains of a forgotten technical infrastructure, a dead city that they occupied rather than built. The unwilling heirs, once the illusion of a linear construction process, is stripped away. The entire understanding of the Inca Empire rapid rise must be rebuilt from the ground up. The territorial explosion of Tawantinsuyo within less than a century was not the result of creating new infrastructure, but of rediscovering and taking control of an operational system that already existed. The vast Capac Ñan road network, stretching across mountains and deserts, was not literally built from nothing within that brief window of time. It was cleared, repaired, and brought back into use. The Inca were not master architects who subdued the Andes with copper chisels. They were fortunate explorers who inherited the remains of a vanished civilization. Latecomers who stepped into immense stone dwellings, already abandoned, and struggled to adapt to an architectural scale that exceeded both their physical stature and their technological means. This perspective immediately clarifies the otherwise puzzling religious behavior of the Inca elite towards certain objects. The veneration of stones at Kenko or the golden disc at Coricancha did not arise from primitive superstition, but from the natural psychological response of a Bronze Age culture confronted with advanced technological artifacts they could neither understand nor reproduce. To Inca priests, These surviving devices, possibly mechanical components, energy panels, or data storage objects, became sacred vessels imbued with supernatural power. Ritual sacrifices and prayers were in essence desperate attempts to operate these silent machines through the language of belief, hoping to awaken the dormant power of the gods Viracocha, who were said to have created them. The Inca social hierarchy also reflects the status of heirs rather than creators. Inca rulers never claimed to have carved the foundational stone blocks themselves. Instead, they declared themselves children of the sun, chosen to govern an inherited legacy. They constructed palaces of rough stone and mud mortar directly atop smooth megalithic walls, producing an architectural irony that is difficult to ignore. The most powerful kings in South America lived within fragile structures perched on foundations from a far greater past. The Inca Empire was, in reality, an industrial-scale effort to manage ruins, where political authority was sustained through exclusive control of forbidden zones and unusual metal objects the common population was never allowed to see. For centuries, we have confused the guardians of monuments with their creators, attributing the intellect of a higher civilization to a warrior society simply because they were the last ones found holding the keys. The silence of history. The consequences of redefining this role lead to a darker truth about what was lost during the Spanish conquest, when Francisco Pizarro and the conquistador armies entered Cusco. They did more than plunder gold and silver. They carried out, deliberately or not, a large-scale erasure of memory. Precious metal artifacts, including the legendary golden disc and statues with non-human forms, were melted into ingots for shipment to Europe, permanently destroying physical evidence of their original structure and function. The Catholic Church, in its campaign to eliminate perceived heresy, systematized the destruction of Quipu records and the killing of the Amauta, the sages who alone preserved oral knowledge of the true origins of the sites. The destruction at Puma Punku bears an even more violent and comprehensive signature, surpassing the damage inflicted by greed or religion alone. The site today presents the aftermath of an immense kinetic catastrophe. Diorite blocks weighing 100 tons were hurled, shattered, and overturned as if they were light foam, scattered across a wide radius. No manual leverage force available to either the Spanish or the Inca could have produced such physical chaos. The fracture of these extremely hard stones requires an instantaneous and overwhelming impact, suggesting an explosive event or a deliberate high-energy attempt to neutralize the site completely before it could fall into other hands. What remains is not the slow decay of time, but a disturbed crime scene, where the most critical evidence has been destroyed or buried beneath millennia of sediment. This silence is reinforced by a modern knowledge system that does not tolerate anomalies. The linear historical model that dictates progression from stone to bronze and then to iron and steel functions as a cognitive filter, automatically discarding or ignoring evidence that does not align with its prescribed timeline. Reports of unusual alloy materials, precise mechanical grooves, or traces of vitrification are pushed to the margins of academic discussion, labeled as mysteries or pseudoscience rather than treated as legitimate data. The greatest fear that permeates this story does not stem from any specific extraterrestrial entity, but from the defensive mechanisms of human knowledge itself. We prefer to accept an incomplete but comfortable history rather than confront the possibility that our civilization is only a fragile recovery after a technological peak that was thoroughly erased and forgotten. The forgotten identity. When every assumption about hand tools is stripped away, every attempt to attribute these works to the Inca is rejected, and the veil of history is lifted. The answer to the identity of the true builders emerges not through a name, but through the nature of what they left behind. The so-called gods, Viracocha of legend, were neither abstract religious beings nor products of primitive imagination. The physical traces carved into granite confirm the existence of a civilization, or perhaps a species, that possessed mathematical thinking, mastery over thermal energy, and a level of mechanical precision far beyond any definition of the Bronze Age or Iron Age. They did not shape stone for worship. They processed stone as industrial components, assembling them into functional systems whose ultimate purpose lies beyond our present capacity to comprehend. The Inca, in all their greatness and tragedy, were little more than children who wandered into an abandoned laboratory after the end of the world. They collected tools they did not know how to use, took shelter in fortresses they could not build, and worshipped dead machines as gods. Their presence at these sites does not demonstrate their evolution. It exposes a vast rupture in the flow of human knowledge. The gap between laser-based stone cutting, or acoustic-based stone cutting, and the Inca copper chisel is the gap of a missing era, an age erased by catastrophe or departure, in which the true masters of this planet vanished, leaving modern humanity to rebuild from nothing atop their remains. The H-shaped blocks at Puma Punku still lie there, cold and sharp, like the black boxes of a prehistoric crash. They do not contain explanations. They are the most uncompromising proof of our limits. We are not alone in the universe, or at the very least, we were not alone on this planet. Yet the most unsettling truth is not the possibility of others, but the absolute silence they left behind. They were here. They built the impossible. Then they vanished without a message, leaving us, the arrogant latecomers, standing before their monumental legacy with bare hands and flawed assumptions, forever locked outside the door of the truth.